Welcome to the Priority Lane podcast, the show where we discover how to work smarter, not harder. I'm your host today, Lawrence Dauncey, and this is the second part of our Women in Business series. And I'm delighted to welcome Claire Lyman to the show. Claire had aspirations of being mounted police many years ago. However, the fashion side of things didn't take her fancy, e.g. the boots she wasn't too keen on, which predominantly led her into a part-time development program with a high street retailer, which then led on to going into financial advice. So she's here with me now. So please, hi and welcome to Claire. How are you today?
Thank you, Lawrence. Yes, I'm really good today, thank you. It's blue sky up here in Leeds in the office. There's a buzz about the team, so all is good.
Good, good. I just wanted to go back to the mounted police thing I've just mentioned, because I know when we spoke the other week, that kind of was a fantastic side swipe for me. Tell me about the mounted police. Where was the interest in that? I'm fascinated.
I always loved horses. We had horses growing up, my sister and I. So riding was a big part of our lives. And so the fact that I could combine a career that I was going to earn some money with horse riding and looking after horses felt perfect at the time. So yes, I always had that in my head that that's what I was going to do. Until then, when I did get into more research around it, I found out that actually at the time, and I don't know whether it's still the case, you had to be on the beat as a police officer for 2 years before you could actually go and apply to be in the mounted police. And at the time, the thought of 2 years on the beat just was not really something I wanted to do. And the bill program was quite a big thing on TV at the time. And I remember the opening scenes of the bill, and there was a lady walking on there with these horrendous black shoes. So apologies if people wear those, but I just thought, oh gosh, I can't see myself wearing those. So that killed the police career. Yeah.
Amazing.
So
And the
mm,
so that image of the Bills shoes led you
yeah.
into a development program at Next. Was that correct?
It was, yeah. So, at the time, again, this was the mid late '80s, and I was shopping in Next. They were kind of the height of their success, and I used to shop at the local store, and I got to know the manager there. And she was chatting to me one day and said, "You know, when you finish your A levels, you could join our development program." And so, that again really appealed because I like Next Clothes. I thought, "Well, this is great. I, can go and learn some skills on their development program and be paid for it." You got uniform in the form of Next Clothes, so that was even better. So I thought this seems to tick a lot of boxes, and at the time, there were a lot of people I was at school with who were talking about people coming out of university and not managing to get jobs, and I was really worried I was going to build up all this debt and then not get a job at the end of it. So much to my father's disgust, I scrapped my university place and went to work for Next on their graduate. Well, it wasn't graduate, but it was their management development program. So it was really exciting. It was very good.
So that says to me that you clearly had a focus there to get a job and start earning money. Would you say that's fair?
It is, yeah.
So
Yeah, I wanted to be able to pay my way, and I felt like I'd done a lot of education, by the time the end of A levels had come, and I wasn't really ready to do another 3 years in university as
that's right.
I was happy to go to university and to grow the debt if I thought I'd got a clear role outlined at the end of it,
Okay.
and I didn't, and a lot of people were coming out of university with this debt and no job, and were having to take really junior roles, that then didn't help them to pay off the debt either. So I just thought, oh, actually, if I can get some of the development and earn money at the same time in an area where I know I really liked the clothes, so I'd be happily a sponsor of it at the time, then that's what I'd
Sure.
do. So I did.
So fashion over function, effectively.
That's right. It
But
was.
but
Yes.
but that's great. But so as you said, much to your father's chagrin, that you opted out of doing another 3 years of study. Um, So that, I mean, that must have taken quite a lot of, uh, I suppose, self-determination, confidence to say, to your dad, I don't want to do this. I want to go out and earn some money. So, I mean,
Yes.
that drive is that something that comes naturally to you, or was it, given to you by your folks?
I suspect it's a combination of the two, but I know I've got it. I've always felt like I want to push forward. So whatever I've done, I've always had my eyes on something ahead of that, where that was leading, what I could achieve in that. I always said I don't do maintenance. I don't want to get to a point where I'm cruising in anything. I want to be able to move on and build something or achieve something or correct something that's wrong. And when I feel I've done that, then if that isn't any longer there, then I want to move on to something else. And so that was definitely there at the time. It was a hard conversation with dad, and I wouldn't choose to have that regularly. But what that did make me do when I started at Next, I signed up to do a management degree with the Open University, and I did that in the same town as I worked in the Next store. So that actually worked really well because I ended up combining everything then. So the only thing I feel I probably missed out on a little bit was university life, but um, my early career in Next was a real fun one as well. So I don't
That's
think I missed out too much.
No, it doesn't sound like it. The fact that obviously you combined going to get a job, earning some money, obviously learning that independence that you clearly have, and then also doing study, part time, simultaneously. I mean, I know there's lots of people who've done that, but that still requires a real level of dedication. So, certainly hats off to you there. Now, in your current role as managing director of Two Plan Wealth, you effectively are leading a business that supports over 760 financial advisors. Is that correct?
It is.
So that's a I mean, that's a huge position, to be, in control of and supporting, that number of firms. So my question to you is, I know that I believe you did work for Halifax for a while. Is that right? So really, what I'm trying to find is, how did your foray start into, the financial advisor sector?
So I stayed at Next for a few years, and then they went through some cutback processes, and their performance wasn't doing as well. And so I started thinking, is this my through life career? Do I want to stay in retail and fashion retail particularly? And I put a few feelers out, and the other retailers at the time just didn't seem as good as my time at Next had been, and I just thought actually Next were at the top of their game, and massively widely respected at the time I was there, and I didn't think there was anything that could rival that really. So I thought, well, actually, what is it I'm doing? And I started to think about what was it I really liked about what I did, and what were the core skills that I wanted to develop, and the environment I wanted to be in. And I kind of wrote myself a list of like, don't like. And I started thinking about roles that had most of what I liked. And actually, I came up with then becoming a financial advisor because I thought, well, it's a selling role. And I think most of the roles that all of us are doing each day is selling, really, if we boil it down, whether we're selling ourselves or a product or whatever else. So I thought, well, it's sales, it's with people. Um, I was always very clear that I wanted to earn money, and I had aspirations for a nice car and a house and all of these things. So I knew I'd got to fund that somehow. So I thought, well, why not be in finance? That sounds an obvious thing to do. So yeah, when I boiled all this down, I left Next and joined the Halifax in the same town as a financial advisor. And actually then I loved being a financial advisor, absolutely loved
Okay.
it. I really felt like I was changing people's lives for the better and protecting them. From unforeseeable harm. So I really felt good about what I did as a job and really enjoyed it. And then when they approached me after a couple of years to manage a team, again, I had another decision, which was, do I carry on solo or do I lead a team? And actually, I went for leading the team because I thought that was going to be the route forwards for my career. But actually, that was the first time that I thought, oh gosh, this is a lot harder. It's a lot harder influencing and motivating other people to be like you'd like them to be when they're not you. And different things make them tick and different things matter to them and their aspirations aren't the same as yours. So that was quite difficult at first, but
How
I
would you?
persevered and yeah, it worked out in the end.
It certainly did. I mean, the to be offered, a team leader role effectively after just a couple of years is
Mm.
already a huge testament. So, my question to you, and all those elements you've just mentioned, that shows a huge awareness that you have to know that, or appreciate that the team, um, whilst managing it might, on a day to day, might be one thing. It's understanding, like you said, that their aspirations are different. They're not
Mm.
you. They don't have perhaps the same drive, focus, motivation that you have
Yeah.
when you get up. So, how did you overcome those little challenges? What is your leadership style?
So I've been really lucky because I think there's certain attributes that to be a good people leader you need, and some of those I really enjoy. And if it's a core skill that you've got already, then it's a lot easier. And then there's other things you just learn through reading and self development, etc. So at the time in the Halifax, I got a lot of support because I did realise at that point that managing yourself and what you do and your own discipline and goals, etc., is a lot easier than managing and leading others. And, so I did a number of courses about what kind of leader do I want to be and what's important to me and what's effective leadership styles, etc. And I did a lot of reading myself as well. Um, and eventually I worked out that there were two things I thought were really key. One is about people and how you connect with people. And that's everything from, the mentoring, the support, the development to getting to know them a bit, trusting them, working as a team, all of those things. And the other is so the people I realized were my biggest asset always in every team I've been in. And the other is communication. The better you communicate with your team, the better you're going to be as a team. Because if you're all on the same page and you're only going to get there if you communicate well, then you're going to achieve things better together. And those two things I've carried all the way through my career. And there's other things around it, but I still believe those two things, certainly in the roles I've had and have ever wanted, have been hugely important. And I think I've just tried to develop those as best I can.
Okay. And have you at during that period where you've obviously you kind of did research into, how what leadership, skills you need, which, where are your strengths, weaknesses, etc. Did you have any mentors at all that helped you with that, that progression?
I've had a number of mentors, but there's a few, as you'd probably expect, who really stand out. So my
Mm,
time in the Halifax, I did something like 16 years in total. I went through Halifax acquiring Leeds Permanent, then Halifax joining up with Bank of Scotland to become HBOS, and then I
fascinating.
left just as Lloyds Banking Group acquired HBOS. Um, but I did 16 years in total. Half of that was in financial services and wealth management, and I did restricted and independent financial advice. And then I moved into the general insurance arena, which was around car, home, and pet insurance. And I did various roles for 7 years in that business on
Okay.
their exec team by then and learnt an awful lot. And there's been a few people. So there's one person at the Halifax who I held in really high regard who was the person I could call and say, I'm not sure that I'm right on this. What do you think? And who would give me guidance and meet me for a coffee. And it's the people who really care about your future and are strong enough to give you the advice that gives you that confidence to push on and to find a way. So he definitely helped me. And in fact, actually, he then took me from the Halifax to work with him at countrywide property services group, where he then became CEO and then chairman, and then IPO'd the group, and then left and did a number of other business ventures. And I still talk to him. He's still a mentor in my life. And then again, I've had the same in open work. So, one individual who I find hugely inspirational is very supportive of females in business.
Mm,
And as
mm,
always, I felt being a real support to me, but my family as well. So, always asks about how we all are, and it's not all just about work, but again, will give me really clear guidance on what I need to do better or differently, or, when I've got questions about options, he'll help guide me. So I think it's really important to have that role, but it has to be somebody, A, that you can trust, and B, you can relate to. Um,
mm,
and I don't think
mm.
it's easy to find those, to be honest.
No, I was going to say that, particularly, look, we know that, business or particularly financial services industry is heavily male dominated. Um, So it's great to hear that the two mentors who've really, showed a human element towards you, and, supported you and given you guidance are, male. I think that's
Yeah.
great. Are there any female, leaders in the industry that have given you or provided you with guidance?
A number of them. So I think the male ones are because they were in more senior positions than me, and so they
Okay.
could help guide me as I was developing my career from that perspective. What could be my next role, and what might that look like, and what would I need to do to be a strong contender for it, etc. The female mentors have been really wide and in completely different roles. So I'll network with people who I think I can help, or who I think, can support me. And that's wide ranging. It can be technical knowledge, it can be industry knowledge, it can be product knowledge, it can be one of many things. And there isn't
Mm,
any one person that I would say they do all that for me. I think there's different people that I now have got to know over the years, that I'll call on or I'll link up with. And I think what you work out, and I'm sure this is the same in other industries, but in financial services, there's a lot of the same names now. So a lot of people, that have been around for a number of years, like I have. And so whenever you're going to different, events or summits or conferences, then you bump into these people, and that's really nice because then you're sharing learnings, aren't you? So that all
of
helps, I
course.
think.
Listen, that sounds great that you're kind of able to, you know, kind of pick the best advice from a wide array of, like a talent pool effectively.
Mm,
So,
mm,
you must be immensely happy and lucky and proud to be able to do that.
yeah.
Um, have you experienced, with obviously the male female side of things, have you, in throughout your career, ever experienced the gender bias where it's obviously been more, heavily weighted towards, the masculine side of things? Have you ever encountered that?
Um, I mean, I think I'd be wrong to say there isn't, a bias of men in the financial services industry, because there is. And certainly when I was an advisor, there were very few, and all the way through my career, very few females in similar
Mm,
roles to myself. Um, but I didn't find personally anything that I could see that was blocking them. So I've always believed, I don't believe I'm the same as a man can be in the job. I think I'm an applicant for a job just like they are, and they will bring something different as a man to what I will as a woman. But I
mm,
think collectively they complement each other. And where you've got a mixed team with, gender mix across, and my leadership team here is absolutely like that now, I think that's a really good balance, because you find some skills in females that are more prevalent and the same in males. And that works really well. So I almost get a bit frustrated that women let this hold them back. And I'm sure there's instances where they are being held back. So I'm not saying it's always a female who should do more, but I'm sure there's a lot more who could be a lot more confident in what they're doing and have the belief that. they can achieve in a male-dominated industry,
Sure.
because they can. I'm proof of the fact that you can. So, and it's not just
No,
me. We've got a number of female leaders in open work now. Our board has a good few on it. Our exec team. So, yeah.
that's I was going to ask you, what do you feel are I suppose, the strongest traits or differences, between, the male and female counterparts within business. But, you have hit the nail on the head. I know, last week when I spoke to Jen Toon Davenport, she was mentioning, the nurture and support side of things, which we all know is predominantly a female trait as opposed to,
Mhm,
the male one. So,
mhm,
I, I mean, you clearly demonstrate that also, and I also believe 100% that women are far better at communication than men. Be honest,
mhm,
um, and obviously, women are they're far more capable at multitasking numerous things at simultaneously, where men generally it's a sole
mhm, mhm.
sole focus.
Yeah.
But you mentioned your current leadership team is, awash with, that mix. Was that something that you were determined to certainly, implement throughout your career when you got to certainly at a managing director level? Is that something that you were really keen to implement to get that balance?
Um, when I went out for the roles, I wanted the best person for the role. So,
Okay.
I didn't go out thinking I want a male for this role or a female for
Okay.
this role. Um, Equally, if I'd have filled all the roles and they'd have all been male or all female, I'd have been a bit disappointed. So I would have tried to mix that up, I think. But
Okay.
ultimately, it does boil down to the best person for the role. But like you just described, what I have found is for the number of female conferences that we've done, and we've done one every year since I've been here, and I generally hosted those. And the biggest topics for females are around imposter syndrome and that
Yeah.
confidence piece and believing that they can't do something, whereas a male tends to think they can before they would ever think they can't. So they put their hand up, and a woman would be like, "Oh no, I can't because I don't know enough, or I'm not sure I can do it."
Mm,
So I definitely see that difference,
yeah.
and that does come up regularly. And then the one that I do see as well that is really interesting is the females do seem to be a lot more empathetic, and as a financial advisor, having that empathy can be, really powerful.
Yeah.
So I think again they bring something different, and that's no different in the leadership team. The females do communicate regularly. They are the ones that bring people together. That nurturing piece definitely is there. I do think it brings that balance where they complement each other. I don't think one is right and one is wrong. I think it's
No.
together. It's just more effective.
Okay. No, I do agree with you completely that,
Mm.
uh, that the imposter syndrome, I was going to ask you about that, but
Yeah.
you've clearly answered that question.
Yeah.
The other side of things that I wanted to ask was the mental health challenges, for, women in business, particularly, senior leadership roles
Mm,
that you manage, versus, the home, the home life too. We've all heard, work-life balance is a,
mm,
home balance is a difficult one to juggle.
mhm.
And I just wanted to know how you kind of manage the work home scenario, and if you've ever faced or felt sort of any mental health pressure, doing that.
It's a great question. It's one I've kind of pondered on a lot of the time because I always have listened to people saying, "Oh, you should have, like a 60/40 or whatever, work life." And I've always thought it just never works like that. It is
No.
impractical to try and manage it like that. So I've always believed that it's life and part of it is at work and part of it is not at work. And you can't just draw a line between the two in my mind. I'm not saying that works for everybody, but for me, I take work into my home life and I bring my home life into work. So I'll talk about work, I'll make them feel part of what I do. And that way they're more understanding and supportive of what I'm doing. Equally, I know I need to give them time and I'll do that too, but I'll have the same conversations at work so that work understand that I need this right now to do something with my family. So I've always thought it's one and the same. And at times you'll have pressure to do things in your personal life that you need and want to do. And at times you'll have the same in work. And the only time, it hasn't given me mental health issues, but I've felt tense sometimes when they've imploded. So if something is big happening at work and I really want to be involved and do something about it, fix it, whatever it might be, and equally there's something going on at home, and it is harder when you've got young children, definitely. So
Sure.
I do acknowledge that.
Mm,
Then that can be quite stressful, and that's where you need a support network around you. And I was really lucky. I had my mum and dad quite close to me, and my mum was really good with my children, and so actually that really helped me whenever I was stuck or needed to be away, or my mum would step in and help. And I think that's really important. So if you haven't got that in a
yeah.
family or a close friend, or I can imagine it's really hard at times.
Uh,
But it's never
So,
been too hard for me to push on, and now I do feel like my family are really proud of what I do and want to support me doing it, and I don't think they'd see it any other way. So I don't have any regrets from it at all.
so that having that experience, and obviously witnessing um, that support network that you clearly had, which is
Mm,
which is great. How would you approach, or perhaps, yeah, how would you approach, um, let's say, one of the advisors under your umbrella, if they have a specific, heavy pressure from home side of things, how, now that you have that experience and you kind of know what it feels like, how would
mm.
you approach somebody if they came to you and said, Claire, listen, I've got this. How would you approach? Would you give them as much, support and, I suppose, space as possible? How would you deal with that?
So yeah, I think that is all part of the communication piece. So I think the first part is, and the most difficult part is, that people feel they can come to you with those things. Because the worst thing that happens is if they feel they can't, in my mind, because you're not stopping it happening. They're going to feel like that, whether they tell you or not. And if they don't tell you and you can't do anything about it, then, well, then that's exactly it. You can't do anything about it. So they're not getting the help then. So, certainly for my team or the advisors, I would always encourage them to come to me or somebody in the team. And they do. A lot of advisors call me directly. And that, I think, keeps me grounded. And I like the fact that they do that. Um, and so if they came with a personal challenge like that, then yes, we have group wide support with lines that you can call for support, and mental health challenges, or bereavement helplines, that kind of thing. So a number of helplines. And again, we're a community, so we would offer as much help as we could. We can give help around the advice they're giving. We can help with their clients. We can help with locum support. There's any number of things we can do. It's just being aware of what the challenge is and then discussing what you can do to support them. And I've seen a number go through a number of experiences. We all do.
Mm,
It's amazing as you get to know people, you listen
yeah,
to their life and the ups and downs that they all have throughout it. And nobody hasn't had something, in my experience. So it's just being there and being proportionate in your help, but making it personal and being approachable. I think they're the most important things, because some people just want you to know but don't want you to do anything. Um,
sure, sure.
you need to agree that with them. That's kind of the contract with them, isn't it? But I do think
But
it's
that's
more prevalent, and I am seeing a lot more of it. And that's tough. But I do think there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people at the minute, aren't there? Life is generally not easy at the minute with everything that's going on.
No, it is difficult. So you would, I mean, the fact you adopt that, I suppose, open door policy. I think, from perhaps, employee side of things, they may sometimes have a fear factor of, perhaps potentially knocking on the door of, the boss and saying, "Listen, I need to be home 2 days next week," or whatever it is, for fear of reprisal. Because, you know, I've been in business for 30 odd years, and I remember, companies I worked for that were, you have to be in the office, 5 days a week. There is no,
Mm,
you weren't given that sort of space to potentially, have that time that you need. Um, how do you think that's really progressed hugely since your first days in business? Because it must have been the same. That was pretty
It was
stringent.
the same. It was very rigid.
Yeah,
And I don't ever remember having time off sick or working from home or any of that. I
right,
was in the
exactly.
store or the bank, wherever I was working full time, and that
Yeah,
was it. And I was in on a Saturday too, so it was kind of 6 days a week.
yeah,
And no, it is very different now. I think COVID changed everything, and rebased everybody's working patterns. And actually now it's a careful balance of meeting the needs of what people need for their home life and personal life with the needs of the business.
the
And I think
productivity.
that's a bit of compromise. It's give and take. So we don't expect everybody to be in every day in the office. Ideally, I'd like people in 2 to 3 days a week. But, if one week they can't and the next week they can, then absolutely fine. And if somebody's really suffering, then we'll support them in any way we can, and whether that's they're in no days this week. I always think that that gains a respect and a trust if you can help them when they need it. And then they're far more likely to be on your page and supporting you after that. And then you've got a really good connection, haven't you, with them, and they'll come to you with other things, not necessarily problems, ideas, and it's just a lot more fulfilling. People are people, aren't they? You can't treat them like machines. We don't work like that, do we? So
No, no,
I,
and
I mean,
I
I
said
like sitting with the team. I'll plonk myself out in the office in amongst everybody, and I like listening to all the chats, and I like thinking I can help with different things, whether it's the home life or work life.
mm,
That's all part of it.
so that clearly. I was going to say, can you imagine taking the office environment that we remember from all those years ago, which was, as you said, rigid, I said very
Mm,
stringent, and
mm.
trying to implement that now.
No.
I would imagine that productivity would just nosedive
Yeah.
exponentially.
Yeah.
I,
Do you
uh,
just
I
you would get people just walking out. And I understand it when you've got people coming, even, in the office in Leeds here. I mean, lovely office.
yeah.
I drove in this morning. I don't normally drive in. Took me an hour and a half to drive in, which is ridiculous because it's 25 miles or something like that.
Okay.
Usually I come by train, it's 30 minutes, but it costs me £12 on the train. If you can save what would have been 3 hours coming in and going home, or the £12 or whatever for the train by working at home for the day, and it means you can walk your dog or you can pick your little boy or girl up from nursery or drop them off or whatever, then I can see that balance, how it's difficult to work out best. But equally, if you're not in the office and you're working at home, then I think you miss out on a lot more than you can really quantify. So the relationship building, the feeling of belonging to something, the culture it drives, the chats at the water cooler, all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
You don't get those at home. So it's kind of a trade-off, isn't it? You want the best of both.
Sure. No, I'd agree. Now, I've got a couple of things that I've noted down here that they're just kind of stats for
Okay.
um, the financial services
Mm,
industry, and one is that it's approximately 8.6% of the UK population receive professional financial advice on investments, pensions, or retirement planning in the last year. Now,
mm,
that seems to me extremely low.
mhm.
Why is that?
It's a really good question. I think there's a couple of reasons. I think one, it's generally not a trusted industry. So I think people will wonder whether they're going to get the right advice, and so they just don't touch it. I think another is they probably feel they've got to have a lot of money to get advice, whereas actually that is not the case. The earlier you start in your career taking that advice, then the better off you're going to be later on in your career. And it's not just about growing wealth, it's about all the other areas. How you're going to fund your house purchase. It's about borrowing, it's about protection, for yourself, for covering your income, for your family. So I think there's a bit of an ignorance around what it is, and I don't want to be made to look stupid, so I'm not going to ask. Um,
Okay.
and then there is a lack of financial advisors. It's not easy to access it. It's a relationship business. It's a relationship process. So unless you know somebody, how are you going to access it? You know, there are some digital tools now, but they're nothing like as effective or well progressed as they are in other industries. So there's a gap. There's a big
Right.
gap, and it's getting
Well,
bigger.
that trust uh, point that you've just made. So I've been boring, as I've said in previous podcasts. Everyone over the last 30 years with the following uh, kind of saying that I have is people are the source, technology is the tool. In other
Mm.
words, people come first. Technology can obviously help, but we
Yeah,
developed it. So,
yeah.
um, and then mentioning that trust. So, with only like not even 9% of the UK population actually seeking or getting financial advice, because as you said, the trust issue, they're not sure. I feel perhaps if there were more female advisors, um, that might go up because, I think sometimes people might consider they're being sold to, or they could be being duped if it's a man. How do you feel about that? Do you think that women perhaps may carry a more trustworthy persona in the financial services?
I wouldn't like to say that because I don't know. I
I
haven't
said
got
that.
any evidence to support
So,
that. But what I
no,
would
no,
say is I know that the transfer of wealth over the forthcoming years is moving more to women than men. And if you are a middle-aged female wanting some financial advice, would you be more likely to go to a man or a woman like you? I think you'd probably more likely go to a woman like you. And I think that's that connection, whether I wouldn't necessarily badge it as trust, but I think there's a connection there that, it's that empathy and things that we talked about before. So I think that
sure,
transfer of wealth that is in the main inherited wealth, those females probably won't have an advisor and they need one. So I think that gives an opportunity. And I always feel quite saddened by the fact that there aren't more females wanting to come into this industry because I've just had the best career and loved it and met some incredible people. And I feel like I've made a difference to a lot of people's lives. So why would they not want to? So I
right.
just wish more people, females in particular, would look at it.
Okay, because out of the
Mm,
35,500 IFAs, I think in the
mm,
UK, um, the average age of those advisors is 58,
yeah,
and 18% are women,
yeah,
which and only 5.7%, I think, are below the age of 30. So there is a huge
gap.
discrepancy, massive,
Mm.
massive, massive gap. In your capacity as managing director at Two Plan, have you or do you put on, I suppose, road shows or something uh, to to effectively give that advice, give that information, so that there no fear factor? Effectively, do you put up hold, I don't know, open days where you can attract and try and generate some sort of exposure to the industry? Have you ever done? Do you do
We
that?
do a lot of different things. So we're lucky in that within the group we've got our own university. Effectively, it's a business school we call it. So the Open Work Business School, and within there we've got a variety of different programs for how you can develop yourself. And so we do a lot of work around. We find women will come in. They'll come in administrative roles, and they'll come in as an office manager role, etc. And they'll feel quite comfortable with that, but they won't think about going on to giving advice because they probably think they can't do it. It's that imposter
Okay,
syndrome piece again.
sure.
So we have
Yeah.
an awful lot of support there around how help to take exams, why it's good for them, mentoring, guidance, support, people who are running their own firms as females, and we've got a number of really successful ones. So we do a lot out of that business school, and then we do a lot of things around UK wide, both with all of our people across the Open World Partnership, but also then connecting with, people who we find quite a lot of entrants come from teachers or from the military when, they're coming out of the military and they want to change a career, or professional
Mm.
sports, quite a few come into the industry from there. So we hook up with a lot of those. I think the key, personally, I think the key is we need to find a way of making it more attractive for people as they're leaving school, going into university, to to have it on the radar then, because I don't hear many people saying, I'm
Yeah.
training to be a financial advisor, or I'm going to university, then I'm going to be a financial advisor. It's almost like an unspoken job. And I just don't really know why, because it doesn't deserve that reputation, I don't think.
No, that was my point. How
Hmm.
can how can you, you know, raise that,
Yeah,
get those percentages up, get that exposure to the industry.
yeah,
And it must be, you need to start from an earlier age to,
yeah,
I
it
sup
is.
to focus on that. So
And it's an
is there
education. It's an education about them and their own finance and their own, wealth management, etc. So it's an education for them. But I think collectively, as an industry, we all need to do this. It's not just open work; it's everybody. There's some really big names: St James Place, Quilter,
yeah,
etc.
yeah,
We need to
yeah,
work together to educate people younger, and then when they're in school, hopefully, then they'll find a hook and think, "Oh, well, this is actually really interesting. I find it really interesting." So,
sure.
go and find out more. And then it starts there, doesn't it? My
It
my reason for going to Next was because I was buying their clothes. It just needs a hook.
yeah, correct.
So
It does.
don't
So
put the shoes in, the black shoes. Mm.
so in terms of a hook, that leads me on to just a couple of closing things. How would you now what piece of advice would you give, whether young men, young women, let's focus on, the female side of it to get that percentage up. What piece of advice or hook would you now offer, young women to come into the industry?
I would say don't assume. So come and find out. And there's lots of places to find out. There isn't just one role, there's a plethora of different roles. And don't be put off by the sales word, because the number of conversations I have around that, but I don't want to be a salesperson. In every day, you're selling something. You just don't realize you're doing it. So don't think about it as just sales. Advice is quite different to sales, I think. So I'd say come and find out for a start. Ask some questions and find out, because there's a wide range of different roles you could take. I would say have confidence in yourself and don't be put off by the fact that you might see more males than females. I don't see that as an issue. It never has been for me, so don't let it be for you. And I would say find a mentor, find somebody that is doing it now that can give you some guidance. And there's plenty of those people around, that can kind of give you a view of what it's really like, and what to focus on and what not. Don't just think of tomorrow. Think of 3 years on, 5 years on, 7 years on. Where do you see yourself then? And think about what it is you really want to do, that you enjoy doing. Because the other thing I learned is you can't be brilliant at everything. You're going to lean on certain things that are skills you've got that you find easy or
Mm,
easier. So don't try and be as brilliant at everything across the piece. You can't.
yeah,
Focus on being really good at the things you are really good at, and then bring in people to work with, or in your team around you, that bring the other skills.
brilliant. Well, listen, Claire, it's been an absolute revelation. Thank you so much for joining me. Um, My name's Lawrence Dauncey. I'm host of Priority Lane podcast, and that was my chat with Claire Lyman, Managing Director of Two Plan Wealth. So if you've got any questions or you've got any comments, please get in touch with me, and I will forward them on to Claire, and we'll do what we can to support. In the meantime, thank you very much again to Claire, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you, Lawrence. Really enjoyed it.
Cheerio.
This episode is sponsored by My Brokers app, a white label app built specifically for financial advisors and wealth management professionals. If you want to know how you can have your own app exclusively for your business and your clients up and running by this time next week, visit mybrokers.app or download the free My Brokers demo app from your favorite app store.